All right. So now it says that I'm live streaming, but
Yeah.
I got to find out where it's because it's probably not going to where I set it up. It's probably going to like a live stream that it set itself up with. So hold on a sec. I got to go look at my channel, find out where we are. Yeah, there we are. Okay. All right. Okay, so we're live. The video's called Sheridan's right now because I just had to throw it up there live on the spot. I'm going to throw this in the chat room over there where everybody else is waiting. Sorry. Migrate over here. All right, so there we go. Hi, guys. It is Zerilath, and man, oh man, I am excited to have for the very first time a friend of mine that I've known now on from Facebook before they went really gay, and not in a good Christian Morris way, but in a really bad woke kind of way, and kicked the man off. Right, this is my friend Thomas Sheridan, one of the leaders in Fortean research, possibly a modern day Irish druid. Definitely one of the absolute champions of Ireland, at least in the social sphere and the magic sphere right now. The immensity of what you're doing, Thomas, is so impressive. I even when I disagree with certain basic like certain like little things that come maybe just from how my American experience is panning out and imagining it from the Irish and the European experience. I sit there and I say to myself, there's something that has to be said and done like this now, and just sit quietly and listen and find the wisdom in it, right? And so this has been incredibly cool. How are you, Thomas?
Oh, well, thank you for that kind introduction. I'm grand. I'm fine. Thank you.
Excellent. So there's been so many things that have always been on my mind, a lot to think about, because I went through a process of in my own personal discovering of paganism and magic, and who I was and who I wanted to be, especially with the American experience. That's been a big part of it. I was kind of mentioning this a little bit with Stein earlier on Greyhorn, because I was just live back there for my tarot and rune reading practice. And I was just talking about this coming up and saying that one of the things I wanted to talk to, I want to talk about what's going on in Ireland too. That probably should be talked about first. But also I wanted to go over a little bit of the subject of how the American who can't get out to Europe like myself right now because of what he has to do here in the Americas as he's growing and developing in paganism. The one difference that we have, knowing our ancestral ways is not having access to our ancestral lands, right? We have a Christian history in America, or at the very least, the colonial history in America, and the appeal to what paganism was here beforehand with the natives and other such history, right? And so that's one of the big things where you're trying to find that relationship when it doesn't have a personal story to you. You have to know about the stories of those whom were there before your tribe moved in, right? So that kind of makes it a little bit different, especially when you're struggling to get your roots back from what the Abrahamism took from the Carpathian White. You know what I mean? So America, and even my situation, the American Northeast. What do you see in the way that the land here is that can help the American who's trying to have his more Norse, Celtic, Slavic, or whatever experience?
Well, it's easier for you guys than I'd say it would be for Australians or people in Argentina in the Southern Hemisphere, where even the seasons are flipped. So it's a lot easier for you guys. Now, when I lived in the US, was still feeling that feeling there that I feel in the wilds here. And I think a lot of it has to do, it's the same landmass. If you look at the Appalachian Mountains, it's a part of the same land. It's basically a kind of a mini continent that stretches from Norway all the way down to nearly the Gulf of Mexico. It just dips under the North Channel and pops up in Scotland, dips under the North Sea and pops up in Ireland, dips up under the Atlantic and pops up in Maine, Nova Scotia kind of area. But it's the same thing. And so it's the same energetic force that's along there. And like I didn't grow up in New England, but as soon as I started to explore like the woods in Maine and the mountains and all that stuff, upstate New York, I felt very much at home and very comfortable. So I think, if you look at the stuff of Appalachia, these people coming over and even the Pennsylvania Dutch, they all seem to settle along that band all the way down to the Arcadians from the Cape Breton and came all the way down to New Orleans. They seem to have settled along that band. So it just, that can't be by accident. That can't be an accident that the so-called Scotch Irish, which really means Irish Protestants, moved along those mountains down into, the Blue Ridge Mountains, into the West Virginia, down into the Smoky Mountains in Tennessee. They were following an ancestral landscape that dips under the Atlantic and takes off again. So in terms of the actual physical landscape, other than climatic and, obviously different animals and flora and fauna, it's pretty much the same. It's pretty much the same. And in terms of the archetypes, okay, now, all the gods and the goddesses are, and you can take this to a literal belief or to archetypes, but fundamentally at the level, they're archetypes representing forces of nature and the cosmos and the human condition, the consciousness. So therefore, if you are in New England, and this is why I'm such a huge Lovecraftian fan, he got it, he definitely got it, that you can still archetypalize your surrounding landscape to incorporate the old gods. For instance, okay, most Irish people are of Viking descent, so we have the Odin, Thor, Norse stuff, and a lot of us have Anglo-Saxon through the Normans and stuff like that, so we have that as well. But we don't necessarily work in those worlds, although some of us do. This is the beauty of paganism. No, this is like a maxim, actually. If you look back to like ancient Hellenic and Roman paganism, Latin paganism, they were constantly incorporating gods from other pantheons. Constantly. This is how Mithra from Persia came into the Roman pantheon. This is how Minerva, practically in parts of England and France, became a Celtic god. This is how possibly Beltane, May 1st, may even be actually rooted in the festivals that were brought by Roman soldiers of Baal veneration, which made its way into Scotland and probably over to Ireland. So, this is the thing about the pagans. They see an archetype they like, they say, oh, I'll have that, I'll take that. So there's nothing to stop people in the Americas, especially in the Americas, but especially on the East Coast of America, from adopting that. You're not that distant. You're not that far away, either archetypally or spiritually. So it's something I wouldn't worry about. I wouldn't really worry about it. I'm not going to say worry about it. I wouldn't really be overly concerned because I don't live in Europe, that therefore I don't have the same level of veneration. That's like saying to a Catholic, if they don't live in the Vatican, they're not a good Catholic. It doesn't work like that. The spiritual thing operates outside space-time anyway. So you would really, all you need to have that touchstone of the landscape, and you guys have it there. So I really wouldn't worry about that.
Yeah. I think I definitely have felt that is as simple as it needs to be, right? Because like I'm grateful when I meet European pagans and ones that they know a great deal about the pagan way, and I talk about what I think is my pagan way here in America, I typically get positive feedback about where my mind is at, where my attitudes are at. And I'm, and it's just like, oh, I'm glad that what feels comfortable and right for me is also working with these other people that I like, and that I am a real deal despite it all. Right. So it's something that I'm finding the things that can't be taken away from me. Right. Those important, deep, soul embedded truths. That's and it's such an interesting matter for it, because I think that it's interesting because right now, that question was so satisfying. I'd love to use it to segue because, like I said, what you're doing in Ireland is so important, right? And this is a big part of immigration, right? You've got people from foreign lands, a foreign life, a foreign culture. Uh, um, uh, their god is not a pagan god. It's a god in the name of a religion that they're bringing, which I think is one of the distinctions, right? And so that causes so much. It causes so much turmoil, and so you've been in this important, war to change the attitudes in basically the state that is meant to be protecting Eru, and getting it to kick out all these people, right? What is missing with people in that world, right? Because we're pretty friendly, like, we have no problems with, the other Abrahamics as far as this kind of issue. It's only something that we're seeing with Islam migration, and how it's an issue for Christians, certain Jews, and the pagans.
Well, Christians had 1,200 years of war against us, so they've only been behaving themselves since the third, the third Prussian Crusade, when
Right.
they finally conquered Karelia and East Prussia, and the Danes got their flag thrown to them from Jehovah in heaven and all this nonsense. And but up until that, and then they started picking on each other through the Reformation. No, it was a lot. This is the thing. The Abrahamic God needs mediators in Europe. Like Christianity would not have flourished in Europe if it wasn't for the fact that the Romans openly adopted paganism as central to Catholicism. There's literally, you take Jesus Christ out of Catholicism, you have a pagan religion in every way, shape, and form. That's why the saints are all former gods and goddesses. You have holy wells. You have the feast days are all pagan. Blah blah blah. We all know this story.
Yeah.
So the only way it infiltrated over a very, very long time. I have a documentary called "Who Stole the Allfather." I'd even go as far as that the image of Christ on the cross was probably Odin hanging from the Yggdrasil tree. And I'll give you, I think there's substantial evidence for that, and the fact that the crucifix wasn't used as the central motif of Christianity until about 1000 AD. Up until that point, it was everything from a cockerel to a pair of keys to a fish symbol. And then suddenly, when they're entering into the Germanic northern world, they suddenly switch massively to this fella hanging off a stick. So it's very interesting. And then the whole thing of St. Peter crucified upside down. That's Odin on the tree and everything. So the only way they could do it was adopt the Christian, the Celtic, Germanic, all of it, Norse, all of it, and sort of dovetail it into the Christian story. And this is how this is why you have Augustine saying don't destroy the pagan temples, because the population are familiar with them. Just remove the unclean idols and sprinkle them with holy water. And this is why you have churches, and even here in Ireland, some abbeys that are definitely were built by pagan times. They just reorientated the entrance to make them look Christian. And you get a lot of that kind of thing. So Islam, that's a different thing altogether. First of all, it doesn't really offer Europeans anything. It's on every level, it's completely alien. And they're not going to be, the Catholicism didn't fundamentally change or expect to fundamentally change the behavior of of pagans. They even adopted the days of the week. With Islam, it's different. This is why I think Islam is doomed anyway in Europe. It's doomed to fail. There's climatic, environmental, and specific cultural reasons that the only way they could make it happen is by force. But that's a very risky game they're playing. So, I mean, yeah, we watch and wait. Personally, I think that, Islam could be stopped in Europe simply by banning halal food on animal cruelty grounds and switching off the central heating in winter. Not the end of them. I really do believe that. They're only here because of the comforts and the excellent lifestyle that Western Europe in particular offers them, which is that allows them to be sheltered from our harsh winters. And it's the same. That's just how I feel about it. I was quite worried about it until recently, but I'm not so much now. Because I feel that there's organic forces at work here that will take care of it very much in the schemes of natural law. Don't be surprised if Muslims start converting back to paganism, and that would be the one that I would be looking out for.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually easier for a Muslim it's actually more sensible when you think about it, for a Muslim to revert back to paganism, and I'm talking about like everything from Persian paganism to Turkish paganism to Semitic paganism, than it is for us to come over to their side. And I think there's forces below the subconscious mind that actually look for these equilibriums and balance of natural law. And don't be surprised. I mean, Islam fundamentally lives with one major problem right now. They were told that they were the final religion on earth, that it was everything before that, Christianity, Judaism, and then the prior pagan religions, such as, the Persian paganism, that these were, and Arabic paganism, they were all just precursors to this, the final one. God, and if you're a Muslim, you are completely and totally in the favor of God, absolutely. And yet the Islamic world it's a catastrophe. They look around at all the Christian and other countries all around them, and they're all doing better. So fundamentally, I think a lot of neuroses, there's a huge neuroses within Islam, which is we're supposed to be the ultimate spiritual beings on the planet, and yet all our countries are war zones, disasters. There's something seriously wrong, and that could be the catalyst to cause a new generation, just like it's happening in Israel, believe it or not, to look towards Semitic, Arabic, and Persian paganism. Don't be surprised if that starts happening.
My wonder is that, with everything that I've studied, I've got a big feeling about the I call it the imposter sky gods theory, right? Where whether it was some man-made invention or something or something really Fortean happened or whatever, that at a certain point in the humanization, literalization of the gods, that somebody of advancement came along, said we're the gods, and conflated what was going on with our spirituality with what these people that were putting on a damn good look at me, I'm the thunder god show with maybe his laser rifle or something. Right. And because like paganism, and then there's all these, but we still had there were so many different things going on back then, right? I think there were different kinds of cults that weren't the same thing as kind of like the tribal pagan thing, right? And you've got the city religions, city states where there was like a god for that city, which kind of feels like a government control kind of thing in many respects. And so like, is it like, do they have that rebirth of true nature and true natural law in the spiritual transformation and reclamation of their roots, or do they go only so far back as to why they may be appealed to worship the Anunnaki literally, because some of it was based on their original pagan and some of it is religious bureaucracy? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I look, this is all very highly theoretical.
Yeah.
I've seen absolutely no proof there ever was an Anunnaki or anything like that. other than Stitchin's particular interpretation, which is extremely controversial. So
Yeah.
so we're in swings and roundabouts world here. But let's talk about, like, in a spiritual sense. Let's forget all the archetypes, right? And all the gods and the names and the particular forces. There's a fundamental spiritual dynamic to the universe, okay? And it communicates through human beings in a kind of what we would call our soul, our subconscious mind. And the beauty of paganism is it will adapt that spiritual force to the particular environment in which they're in. So if you live in the Arctic Circle, you have ice giants and ice gods and aurora gods and stuff like that. If you live in the Mediterranean, you have sea gods, this kind of thing. If you live in a city, and this is particularly happening, particularly in Babylon and Samaria, this was a big deal that they had, like, the whole thing of the Ishtar Gate. Beyond the Ishtar Gate was a different reality. It was a different god world because there wasn't agriculture directly in the city itself. And that's how paganism works. If you look at Hinduism, which is probably the biggest form of paganism in the world, there's a goddess for everything. There's even, they've even had, like, gods created in the 70s that represent computers and technology gods. This is the beauty of the pagan religions, is they adapted changes in society. A few years ago, I came with the concept of chaos paganism, where it doesn't really matter what the actual archetypal is. You can actually apply anything to it. This could be Lovecraftian gods. This could be Superman, Spider-Man. You pick it. It works. But just apply it to the actual spiritual force. And it allows you to sort of, like, psychically transmute the spiritual force into your own daily life. And this is the beautiful thing. The problem that a lot of pagans have today, particularly the Nordic pagans, is they have theologicalized their faith, and they've gone too strictly. They've gone kind of churchy. They've gone, this whole thing of the 9 noble virtues. That's the 10 Commandments, for fuck's sake. And they've gone very, churchy and specific rules and stuff like that. And I don't think, I haven't seen any evidence that they were like that in the old days. All I really see in the old days was particular adherence to festivals, and that were basically according to calendar cycles or times of the year and stuff like that. So again, don't get hard and fast stuck with actual specifics, because we're it's a shot in the dark. We don't know. Like, even look at the United States, right? Now, in North America, there are megaliths, stone circles, and dolmens and so on, all down the east coast of America, from up around New Brunswick all the way down to the Virginias, Carolinas even. Who built them? Who built them? Obviously the same people at a fundamental base who built the ones in Ireland and Britain and the rest of Europe. This speaks of something far deeper. Is this the true meaning of Atlantis? We've a lot of shots in the dark. And I think it's the biggest trap someone can make is to get to dogmatize their paganism highly. Like, we all have a god or a goddess that we have a very specific feeling towards. That's quite beautiful. That can be lovely, But at the same time, too, this is the Abrahamic thing. It's a very difficult spell to break, because it constantly think, well, I don't believe in the Bible anymore. I've got to believe in, the Eddas or the Sagas. And the evidence shows, and it's for a fact, that our ancient pagan ancestors were nothing like that. They were very open to incorporation of others. And that's how Christianity actually got in. I mean, they created the Virgin Mary to replace the Sacred Mother. So with a Queen Samirius in the Middle East, or you had Eru here in Ireland, and you had Hecate, and so on. And they did this, then the Christians were, oh, she's just like this. So the Christians were very clever in usurping through kind of like rebranding this kind of thing. So I'm a great believer in avoiding hard dogma and sticking with archetypes. I'm a great believer in that.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely what I hope for, right? I hope to see people, like, looking and seeing that, because everything will be absolutely fine because everybody's going to be struggling, to find the words and the names to apply to the experiences and the feelings and new symbolisms and everything else. That's that's of a deep that's of a deep matter. I know what you mean with the dolmens. There's the one that's not far from me, the Balanced Rock in North Salem, New York. That's the only one that I know that's in my vicinity, and I only go once in a while just because it's a little bit out of the way. But
a lot of them you can't get to them. They're in private property. There's a stone circle in Heath, Western Massachusetts, near the New York State border, in a village called Heath on top of a hill. It's actually the Sentinel Hill it was the prototype for Lovecraft's Dunwich Horror story. And this is another thing. I think a lot of Freemasons in the US know that there was an America BC culture, and they know a lot of this stuff. And I think that Lovecraft incorporated lots of stories talk about. There's a stone circle there that's obviously not natural, and some crazy people have said it's pre-Native American. This is how they drop clues and stuff like that. His father was one of the biggest Freemasons on the East Coast of the United States, Whipple, and he had access to an unbelievable library. The grandfather's library apparently was incredible. So I think there's lots of secrets that are hidden from us, and we're kept deliberately confused. And I think a lot of it, I think it's on a need to know basis, and this is why people join particular orders and stuff like that. But again, I think America, this is the whole thing again. When Christians went to the United States, they had no problem talking about this being a new promised land, manifest destiny. That there's this whole thing. Pagans would have done the same if they had landed in. They would have seen the forests of the Appalachian and the East Coast as like being the new groves of of Druids or Satyrs or wherever they were at that time. Pagans haven't done that. I think that's one of the problems, is that pagans are a bit too locked into the European thing when they really need to go to their backyard and look, and they will find what they're looking for there, rather than strict adherence to dogma. It's again, I'm a great believer in experience. You go to these places, you'll feel it. I really do believe it. You'll feel. I mean, I felt the old gods in woodlands in New Jersey just as much as I felt them in the Highlands of Scotland. I have.
Yeah, no, that's and that's absolutely true. One of my favorite things I document a few times is and you've commented on one or two of them because the Hudson Valley area. So I love Breakneck Ridge. They're renovating bits of it now, so it's you kind of can't really get there unless you're having fun sneaking in. But Breakneck Ridge was a mythology that I made for me. Climbing that mountain was me fighting my Jotun, right? I use that as my mini rite of passage. I need to have the physical achievement of saying that I'm strong enough to carry myself up this dangerous, craggy, it's gonna kill you thing, and I have to do it in the dead of winter, after a snowstorm, when it's icy and the most dangerous, right? And so I did those things, and it changed the way I felt about myself afterwards. Something
very good.
Something that can't be taken away.
That's a true spiritual experience. It's an awesome looking place, that Breakneck Ridge. It looks like a fjord in Norway or something, over the river and things like that. So it was a very epic sort of epic landscape to do it. I think that was a very good thing you did. I think that was a very healthy thing, and the way people should do it. Yeah.
And I love any of these kind of trail places where it's got the old world in it, because there's the estate. I can't remember the name of the estate off the top of my head. That's destroyed over there. Like that's a Lovecraftian times kind of place that existed, like a pre-Roaring 20s. Some guy who got wealthy, during the big economy of its time, and had like a little complex, with different wheelhouses and all sorts of activity going on, and then it's just a dilapidated ruin because the property was given up to the state. And it's interesting to think about, like, man, this is just wildland now. Nobody wanted to turn this into apartments. Nobody wanted to build anything else here, right? It just went back to the wild. And I don't know of any large pieces of property that just gets given back to the wild after the wealthy guy goes.
That amazed me years ago when I was in the forests of Maine, deep in the forest, and all of a sudden you see the chimneys of where all farmhouses and stone walls everywhere. And I says, what were they doing in the middle of this forest? Because you think it's like, you have the feeling that this forest is absolutely ancient. It goes back to like primordial times or something.
Right.
And people say to me, oh no, 200 years ago, this is all just farmland. During colonial times, this was farmland. And when the farm stopped producing food, the trees came back. And I read Henry James Thoreau's Walden and the other essays he wrote about life and he talks about, like, there's the lush farmlands of these places that are now covered in forest, which just was what a lesson that was, and how quickly nature takes back.
Yeah, that's what it was. It was just like I watched a really boring video, parts of it anyway, about new growth New England or something like that, right? And it was explaining that all of these trees are under 200 years old. It's just that it's all dense. And apparently the reason why it's like, I think there was forest there, it was wild, and then they cleared it to make the farmland because there was a sheep boom.
That's exactly what happened. Yeah.
And which then I thought about that, and it's just like, because it's not so much I see chimneys and stuff. You're out there anywhere in these woods, it's like there's like a 3-foot stone wall, just like that, like no mortar, just stone sprawl. And I was just like, what was this? Was this like Native American? Like, is this how they kept property? It's like, no, it's just like this was paddocks for sheep. Sheep, unlike goats, sheep don't really do the jump high thing, right? Yep. So it was part of a paddocking for all these sheep. I was just like, oh, okay. Because I knew it couldn't have been anything wilder than that. It was too mundane.
No, there were farms. It's incredible to think that. That's a very powerful learning experience when you figure that out. That it's like, it re-ancient its own landscape. You think these woods go back to, like, pre-glacial times. Yeah. But like I said, they're only about 150 to 175 years old, and yet you feel when you're in them like this thing has been forever. And that shows there's a spiritual component to that, in that this concept of this is like, what's the struggle of civilization to eke a living out of the wildness, that goes right back to the Epic of Gilgamesh, actually, to emerge from the forest and build fields and farms and build boats and this kind of thing, and get fish and all that. But it's an endless struggle, and people in the modern age are not aware of this. They just think, like, well, hot water is something that just happens, and this kind of thing, and milk is stuff that just arrives in the supermarket. But it's a very humbling experience when you go into a place where nature's reclaimed it so quickly, and you realize that you develop a respect for the landscape that it's like a pagan experience in and of itself.
Yeah, it is. It is. Oh man. That also brings me, like, what have been your thoughts on what we think we've discovered under the pyramids of Egypt? Everybody's talking about what seems like columns.
I don't know, but I'll tell you something. I'm bloody interested. Now, come on, we've always known forever that there was much more to the Giza Plateau than what we know.
Yeah.
At first, I was like, "Oh, it's too good to be true," and in terms of the illustrations they've shown, they are a bit too good to be true. But these structures definitely seem to be there. If there is, like, sort of an engineered, and as some of the drawings in their thesis or in their hypothesis, I don't know, but they definitely are. They definitely look engineered structures, no doubt about that. So, I mean, this is the kind of thing that the likes of Robert Bauval and Graham Hancock and the rest of them have been telling us about for years. There was a technology before there was a technology, and there was a civilization before a civilization, and that may be the best proof yet of it. I've looked at those pyramids, like I think yourself and most people. And you tell me as a kid, it says, no, that can't be a tomb. It looks like a machine or something. Even the way the causeways and the canals were built and everything, the engineering's too precise.
Yeah.
You know, and the location of the pyramid is bizarre. You know, right in the geographical center of the Earth's landmass,
Mhm.
European, American, North African landmass,
Yeah.
and you know all the other. Oh, it's just too bang on to be an accident or just a
Yeah.
joke or something. So
Yeah.
yeah, it would not. I mean, who knows? Maybe what's underneath those pyramids is the thing that create this reality. You know, a kind of like a an ancient form of some kind of matrix thing or something. I don't know, but I'm definitely interested.
As I understand it, the Gaza pyramid is right underneath the intersection point of I think about 3 or 4 ley lines, dragon lines. So those intersection points are where they like to set up major cities, and when you've got like something that's got a 6 to 8 point radial out intersection, like that's like a mega node, right? And so consciousness, if you put a heavy amount of human consciousness there, um you're putting a whole lot into the psychic field. That's like my belief about the psychic energy relationship with ley lines and these landmarks, whether they be cities or just a simple obelisk or something to that effect. It's a psychic signal carrier on the unconscious level.
Oh yeah, I totally agree with that. I mean, I've seen so much proof. And I mean, look at the trouble that the founding fathers of the United States did to locate Washington D.C. and how basically in the middle of a swamp, like a
Yeah,
worse place of all to build a city, but they actually built it. And I often wonder the same about Venice as well. I know they were refugees and everything, but still to go to that effort and then become an empire later on. Yeah, absolutely. There's something these energy paths that move under the earth. That's another one of these things that they all know that well in the need to know basis. So this kind of esoteric mafia keep to themselves. But yeah, it's true, and I felt them. I've been in places where I felt, and ties in with things like geomancy and the actual architecture of the landscape and the building of cities. And there's places like that. It's so apparent. Uppsala in Sweden is one, and Karlsruhe in Germany is another, and Washington D.C. and and you have more modern cities like Canberra in Australia, where they've done something similar. Milton Keynes in England, which was only built in the 60s, and they aligned it up with solstices and everything. There's actually a kind of a whole study of sort of like 20th century industrial paganism that goes around that kind of city. And even you have like Manhattan Henge, where the sun sets down. I think it's Third Avenue.
yeah.
There's a lot going on there that it's real, but it's very difficult to get to the actual specifics because it's kept within those fraternities.
Yeah, of course, of course. This has been a big reason why I've been up like I've looked into the Bach saga, and I don't take the Bach saga as gospel, right? But as the thing that it is, it seems to make a lot of things make sense. You mentioned Uppsala, for instance. They claim in the Bach saga after the Ice Age, this alleged original human like nobility family, they had sent out some new people from their place to seed new tribes, and a son named Sven went to Uppsala and started the Swedish race in Uppsala as one of the things that they explained. So they may have been
You see,
following
that makes me suspicious. I'll tell you why. I've never read the Brock sagas. I'm not putting it down. Okay.
yeah, for sure. For sure. It's designed for scrutiny.
What you described was the 12 tribes of Israel, just rebranded. That's what it sounds like, the 12 tribes of Israel. And this one tribe went to Uppsala and they did that. I'm always very suspicious when I hear these rebranding of Now, it could be real. It could be sort of
Right.
like a different interpretation of the same initial story. But I'm
Yeah.
always suspicious when I hear things like that because
There's there's a claim that, you know, the Bible is kind of almost a confusing, like, error of explaining things that the Bach Saga is talking about. And the Bach Saga is called the Vainamoinen mythology because it's related to the Kalevala, but it's a mythology, but it is also telling a human story of history through the mythology and explaining things through an idea of a root language. And I don't want to go venture off into territory you don't know. But that's just me kind of making a footnote, because Uppsala is a big, important city
yeah, yeah.
In Norse history, right? So
And
it's one of those reasons why the Bach Saga kind of perks up with someone who's been doing those studies and is very interested in straighten things out from what is otherwise this Abrahamic grift trying to trick us back into hell.
yeah. And again, it's landscape. There's these strange hills in Uppsala that are very intriguing, and they're the center of, like, it's also the center of Freemasonry for the Swedish Rite, which is spread all over Europe. In Germany, they follow the Swedish Rite, and yeah, see, you know, he could be right. He could be right, but it's like when I hear things that sound like it's like the early Irish mythology, you know, that's a lot of the stuff written in the Middle Ages. Some of it, a lot, you know, it's bullshit when they
Right.
talk about, like, you know, Noah's daughter was one of the first. Was the first person in Ireland. You know, that was the Abrahamic monks just taking Irish mythology and let's stick a bit of the Bible in here and a bit of the Bible in there, and then people get that in reverse, and it's not. No, and there's a very there's a very interesting story that, unfortunately, and talk about like mythologies. Lady Gregory, who was like this famous folklorist and mythologist and here in Ireland, back in turn of the century, she was friends with William Butler Yeats. She wrote a very interesting story on this. Has always been a thing with an Irish mythology that there's no creation myth as such. There's that one with the Parthenons, but that's obviously nonsense. That was made up by the Abrahamics. But there's one, she talks about this entity called the Mata, and the Mata is a sea monster that lands on comes up the estuary of the River Boyne, which is where Newgrange and all those ancient sites are in Bruna Boyne, and it's torn asunder by the Dagda, and it creates the reality of Ireland. She never. Now, you read this stuff and you go, "This is amazing. I'm really into this," but she never revealed her sources as to where she got that story from, because it's not in any of the Irish annals. And so this is one of the things that are so frustrating when you know, like here in Ireland, the Royal Irish Academy has suppressed 900 books of ancient Irish history. 900, not one or two, but 900, and they've scattered in between the Royal Irish Academy in Dublin, Belfast, and London. And so, they say things like, "Oh, we don't have the resources to translate them," this kind of thing. Now, I often wonder if she got the story from that, but we're definitely robbed of our real history. There's no doubt about that. And then these Abrahamic bait and switches are thrown in, saying, "Oh, here you go. You know, it's just like the 12 tribes of Israel and all this bullshit." And I'm always suspicious of, like, are we being you know, even Lady Gregory stuff. I was saying, was she stringing us along with a line of shit? You know, who is she really? Who are these people? You know, it's like there's so many trapdoors in ancient history that it's like, and interpretations or redraftings of mythology. I mean, I wrote a book years ago called The Druid Code, and it was just me being so frustrated. Like, what is the root of all this? It's driving me crazy. Yeah. And it was just almost like, yeah, it all goes back to the megaliths as some kind of proto-shamanic world that made its way into sort of like the Celtic and the Nordic. We know all that. That's probably a given to many people.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
so much what seems to me purposeful interpretation designed to throw you off the trail.
Yeah. Yeah, indeed. I was very inspired by your work on Atlantis. I didn't read your Atlantis book yet. And I want to let everybody know, and if you don't remember, I own and have read Puzzling People and the Druid Code. Those are your two books that I've been able to go through now, and I'm going through many a book, both for my channel and for my own private purposes. And I'm a slow reader on many a thing, so I'm going to get around to your other amazing works, because I definitely want to. At the very least, read the Walpurgisnacht and Sorcery, your famous book with the hand. Yeah, so I definitely need to get those two under my belt. But yeah, no, the Atlantis bit, because I think that one of the things I've been thinking about is because I've been trying to figure out this mystery of the Sea Peoples Federation, which seems to have that, quote, Phoenician relationship, and I'm told that history goes back to Atlantis, and I'm almost thinking to myself, what if the Celts, the Celtic people, the Irish people of Eru and all that, what if they were part of like a North Atlantis that was different than the people that would become the Sea Peoples Federation? And when Atlantis was hacked, when it was destroyed, northern Atlantis went and settled in Albion, and the rest became the Sea Peoples Federation. That's been the a little something I've been. Does that sound like anything that makes sense to you?
Yeah, it does. I think definitely the Sea Peoples thing, they're so incredibly mysterious, but yet seem to be so influential. I have a tendency to think that the Nuragic people of Sardinia. Now, we know from genetics and so on that they are the purest, that they're probably the only Proto-Europeans left. You have some scatterings in Iberia and the west coast of Ireland, but my suspicions it was the Nuragic peoples of Sardinia. That ties in perfectly. They were a highly advanced civilization in the Bronze Age at a time. You know, if you go to Sardinia and you see things like, they call it Saint Christine as well, but it's ancient. We're talking like incredible, stone building and engineering, and that these Nuragi's towers and everything, these were very complex, and they were seafaring. So the seafaring, and they were also a bull cult, which is very Indo-European. The actual bull cult thing. Now, so that's my suspicion of who they could be, but I'm not saying that they are. I'm just saying that would be my smoking gun. Now, yeah, I think you're right about the other stuff. There's definitely something to that. That we're so hung up on the idea of Atlantis being one singular place that when I remember, it was during lockdown when I first started, Neil MacDonald contacted me, and he runs megalithic tours and writes his own books on megaliths and stuff like that. And he says, "How do you feel about the Atlantis stuff?" And I said, "Yeah, I think there was definitely an island of Atlantis that was in the Atlantic that was destroyed, but I think it was like an empire. And I think the megalithic regions around the Atlantic, especially places like in Orkney and Skara Brae and all these other, not Skara Brae so much, but like the Ring of Brogner, and all these places are what's left of it. What's left of it, because you look at this, and Graham Hancock has done this quite well on the America side, but on you look on this, there's so many stories, and I first came across it in years ago when I was a kid, a book of an essay or a magazine article, I can't remember what it was, on Tolkien, and he was talking about the Numidians, and he was saying, they're directly based, and someone said it's Atlantis, isn't it? And he says it's a bit more complicated than that. He says there's lots of, he used the word North British, meaning the north of England, Scotland, and the Arcadian Islands, Shetland, stories of kingly races that came from over the sea from the west, and they brought new methods of metallurgy and agriculture. And we know that the megalithic sites of British Isles and Britain and Ireland and France, they're very closely connected to agricultural regions. We know that for a fact. So that were very prosperous back in the ancient, back in the Neolithic and Bronze Age. So you have that. So, and then you have the two of the down in Ireland, the story of them coming from the destroyed cities across over the seas. That sounds just like the Atlantis thing. And it ties in so beautifully into other things, like the megaliths are in the right place. Okay. There is the Azores, maybe a remains of it. There's also the Porcupine Bank, which is just I don't know, about 400 miles that way out to the sea. And they're in there. We do know for a fact that that was above land at one time. And also there is lots of fault lines. In fact, one went off last week in that area. Geological fault lines. The American and European plates meet right down the middle of it. And there's a story of High Brazil in Ireland, which is a very strange story. Island, mythical island in the sea. And then there's the stories of Tir na Og, the land of the young, and all this kind of thing. And so there's so much evidence. There's so much evidence and then you have, like, the Doggerland and the plain of Vigrid in the Norse thing, going to the bottom of the ocean and rising up again with the Aesir gods. There's so much. It cannot be just a story. There has to be when Solon was telling this to Plato, he had to have been telling them the truth. So this place did exist, and there was some cataclysm that caused the disaster, and the refugees, or even what was remained on the outside, managed to survive. The way all over the world you might have empires collapse, but you have, like, it's almost like, the Japanese prisoners from World War II who didn't know the war was over and they were stuck on these islands in the Philippines and stuff.
Yeah.
It's almost like that kind of thing. They didn't know Atlantis was gone, but they continued on the Atlantean ways. And there's so many archaeological anomalies. So we covered this in our film, Atlantis, and the book, An Empire Lost and Found. Like there's so many objects that shouldn't exist in the Neolithic period. Like there's what they call a mace head was found in Newgrange that was actually so beautifully. It's a face. They call it a mace head, but it's a face. And that was made from Orcadian granite, which is, there's one place in the Orkney Islands, it's Atlantis. It's definitely the Ring of Brodgar. Now, they've covered that side up. This is a thing we hear. We hear this right now at Göbekli Tepe. They discovered basically an incredible Neolithic site about 10 years ago in Orkney, right on the narrow isthmus of the Ring of Brodgar. They did some excavation. They found a pyramid, and now they've buried it all up to protect it. There's so much crap like that goes on. But I definitely do believe you. I think you're right about it. There was an Atlantis. The Sea Peoples are probably a separate thing that came a little later, or maybe the same. Maybe they're contemporary, but they were definitely at their peak in the Bronze Age.
Right.
And then you have other things, like the Dogon people in Mali and Western Africa, who talk about how they came from Egypt at the same time that these ancient societies existed. So to me, it's a given. Like, I can't believe that the likes of Graham Hancock is subject to so much hostility when basically he's put together like a forensic scientist or an investigator. Has compiled all this evidence, and it all points to Atlantis was real.
Yeah, no, it absolutely does. It's a certain context. I think I think at the end of the day, once you frame it in the sense that it was an age of man, then which is thus why we would say, oh, it was an empire, right? That's what makes sense to me, right? Just like
the Yugas in Vedism. Yeah, I agree with that.
Like what in Vedism?
The Yugas, the cycles of consciousness.
Right. Like in the Victorian era, the Imperial Age, right? You were living in a time where the world was dominated by 3 empires. You had Christendom, kind of like everybody being semi like agreeable. Like, you know, like you technically had the Roman Empire for a while there was also the Ottoman Empire and the Mongolian Empire, right? And I think the Mongolian Empire sometimes has their names stolen, and that's why everybody starts talking, quote, Tartaria, because the Tatars were some of the most was one of the most prominent tribes in the Mongolian Empire. And so when we're looking at this age long gone, where the aesthetic was different, where we're doing all this stuff with the architecture different, and we lost it, we went nuts, and we went into this whole like millennial kingdom thinking and all this stuff, when really it was just kind of part of us losing a certain technology as we were changing our needs. I mean, especially after World War II, it's just like, why build such a beautiful building? Nuclear bombs exist. Let's get basic about it because we need to survive. And thus brutalism takes over, and we lose all the detail of art in our public spaces because we just think we're going to destroy ourselves. So why bother making anything nice?
Yeah, but it was also a bit more sinister, like French communists in the brutalism school in France basically decided that if we change architecture, we can control people better because they'll have just basically great boxes. And these were deliberately doing it for that reason. These were quite dark people, these French communists, and they were the ones behind the European Union and everything else. So yeah, which is true though. You're right. There was an element of that maybe the United States.
Yeah,
there was a sort of like creeping. Well, actually, it didn't help. This creeping nihilism of atomic war, atomic obliteration, apocalypse was always. It's like, well, I just did a box. I don't need anywhere proper to live. I don't need anything beautiful. Yeah, I think that's right. So it probably played definitely into it, but that was definitely a psyop. Not even a psyop. They were quite open about it. These French communists. If you go into the history of brutalism, what you find are basically hardcore French Marxists who decide to destroy Western consciousness by building shit cities.
Yeah. One of the most influential films that I finally caught like a year or so ago was Jodorowsky's The Holy Mountain, and I think that film incorporates a lot of that, like because the Saturn character, which is played by Jodorowsky's wife, in that thing, she dresses up like a clown, entertains the children or whatever, and she's doing all this in front of like a very like kind of like Victorian era building, a little castle-esque looking, kind of nice. It's got its big steel grates and all that or whatever. Then she's playing Saturn. She gets on a elephant. She rides an elephant with the moon on it. And then at the end of this like little parade where she gets away from all the children she's selling all the stuff to, she goes to a postmodern manufacturing building. Postmodern brutalist manufacturing building, kind of looks like a domed net kind of thing, very futuristic in that respect, like the way a lot of stuff that popped up in the 70s were with the brutalism. And then shows you the horror show behind what she was doing dressed as the clown when she takes the clown makeup off. And then Pluto is an architect, and he's building coffin complexes, right? In that film, like on commission for the city. Like this is so I think we got a lot of people that were tapping into this destruction of art, this destruction of magic, really.
Yeah, I haven't seen The Holy Mountain in entirety. I've seen bits of it. It definitely does look interesting. What you mentioned there about Pluto, have you read John Michael Gear's book on Pluto, where it's very interesting, the thesis he puts across, that the concept of this age we're living in is the Plutonic age. It like literally with the discovery of the planet Pluto, it launched a new, like they knew it was there beforehand because they knew gravitational anomalies in the orbits of both Uranus and Neptune. There was another planet out there affecting it. And how that, so as soon as they came up with this nonsense, there was another planet. Not nonsense. Idea there was another planet. They didn't know about it. The world started to change. The world started modern art came along, psychology came along, and when Pluto was finally found, ironically, it was actually Lovecraft who theorized that this planet existed out there, and so and so this is the whole whisper in darkness, the Migo, and all that stuff. But this we've been living in this Plutonian age of like modernism and stuff, and then they demoted Pluto to not be a planet. And he doesn't put it forward in his book, but I've heard other people put it forward that the reason they did that was to try to end the Plutonian influence. That was, it was not, it was bad for humanity. But now they've made it a planet again, apparently. But it's a very interesting book, and that's a very interesting thing you brought up. Have you ever seen Kenneth Anger's Lucifer Rising? Have you seen that?
Seen it. It's that. Okay, so the other book, I'll put it on my list. Lucifer, Kenneth Anger. Well, this is something to watch or something to read.
It's a film. It's a film he made, and it made around the same time as 2001: A Space Odyssey. Oh, it's very thelemic. So Kenneth Anger, who wrote Hollywood Babylon, he's also a Crowleyite occultist, and
yeah,
he's like was this kind of like underground hardcore queer filmmaker back in the day, and he got into Thelema and this kind of thing, and he made a film called Marion Faithfull and Jimmy Page is in it. And it's actually a beautiful film, but Vincent Belowski did the phenomenal soundtrack for it. But definitely, if you want to see a film that's deeply esoteric and deeply magical, check out It's only an hour long. Lucifer Rising by Kenneth Anger. It's free to watch on YouTube. But I found that film. It starts off with kind of like it sort of progresses through the tarot basically, but in terms of like these cycles you're talking about. These like yugas, but the Egyptian thing, and then it moves to the Middle Ages, and the fact that it was made at the same time as 2001: Space Odyssey, I've watched both of those films together, and one kind of answers the other. It's very interesting. It was the beginning of the occult revival in the late 1960s, early 1970s, and I thought a lot of things were happening in the West, particularly in the English-speaking world, where you have this growth in occultism. And it all ties in beautifully with all that stuff. And I find I get more answers from that now than I do actually, archaeology so much and things like that. We know that's not a hard science anyway. Or even, we know that lots of documentation has been destroyed deliberately by churches, and God knows what's in the Vatican Library and stuff like that. These films are like The Holy Mountain, like Lucifer's Rising, like 2001: Space Odyssey. They kind of open. They're like they open a portal in your subconscious mind. Just the act of watching them that solves mysteries. Not solves mysteries, but provides answers.
Absolutely. I'm consistently on a kick for that. I did a whole huge psychological analytical breakdown of The Shining. With my buddy, he actually just showed up in the chat, Slick Dissident. So we did like a whole video on the Shining, specifically The Shining forwards and backwards, as spoken about in the Room 237 documentary. So I found all that, put it together, and showed showed like, because not many filmmakers are literally making their film in that magical way where where you're dealing with that level of operating with the film technique to the inner motivator of the viewer in the way that he commands the sound and the forms in his films.
Oh, you could do entire shows all about that stuff. It's so interesting. And there's so many different ways you can take it. Yeah, and I never get tired of anyone's views on that stuff because it seems to be all interesting and all useful. It's like the ultimate palette of colors to actually draw stuff from. Yeah, that's a whole. And I don't really talk that much about it, but something I kind of do as a hobby at home. I'm meeting someone for a dinner in about 10 minutes, so can we wrap this up soon?
Oh yeah, sure. Thank you so much. We've been on for about an hour, I think, with the late start. Yeah, it's been about an hour and 5 minutes. You want to do the dinner thing? Okay, cool. Yeah. In a short couple of minutes, this will be my last question. Then I'll let it wrap. Then I'll let it wrap up. I wanted to ask you a sympathy for the devil question as a last kind of question on the magic subject, right? Um, I see what you're saying about Maria Abramovich, right? This misunderstood figure who went and decided to do her magic and art pieces and to do things in commission with the elitists of the world. But then when I look and I get a chance to see some of the other stuff she does, interviews and a couple other performance pieces, it's just like she's doing something in shadow art here, right? And but I'm still trying to fully understand what she's done, wrapping herself up with the elites and everything that they did, but I think I do understand it. I wanted to give a second to maybe like elaborate some of the things that you've said about the good that she's doing through her work.
All magical processes are equally mix of shadow and light, just like a painting is a mixture of shadows and light, tonality to create the painting. If the paintings didn't have the different light and shadow, you wouldn't see a painting. You just have a mass of splotches. We live in an age where people, if you went and you saw what real shamanism is, not these people banging drums on the side of a hill somewhere, but you would be shocked by the intensity of it. Because in an age when energy was less affordable, people had to go to like things like like you have an annihilation gnosis where you bring yourself to the point of death by putting a plastic bag over your head and then having someone pull it off just before you die in order to achieve. This may seem like, oh no, that's not spirituality. It is. It's it's both sides, and she works in the extreme of that. She works in the extreme, and you just because you don't like it doesn't mean you understand it. I'm not saying me. I mean you and the
Yeah. Exactly.
Not you
Mhm.
personally. And she openly talks about like the spirit cooking thing that comes directly from a Slavic magic paganism of communicating with dead ancestors. It's a form of necromancy, okay?
Mm.
And she has taken it to the extreme and done it on a global scale. But it just means it just means communication through feasts, and she does it in extreme ways with dead ancestors. And we have this very similar things in Mexico and places like the Day of the Dead and so on. It's very similar to that. She amazes and disgusts and frightens and enthralls and blows my mind in good and bad ways that she is the most full-on out there human being I'm aware of on this planet at the moment. And she's operating on a level that, I mean, the fact that she was the only celebrity that came out and said Trump is a great magician who will make the world a better place shows me that she was no dummy and she knows exactly the score. She does pictures of her with the Rothschilds. So what? Dude, what does that mean? It means nothing. She could be just using them for money, taking their money to open a studio to sell artwork. Good, do it. I'd do that. I don't have a problem with that. Take the fucker's money. So that's one thing, right? The other thing too is like that. There's unfortunately the conspiratorial Christian end of the things got a hold of all this and sexed it all up into like something. Oh, it's demonic. It's evil. She's this, that, and the other. She is probably just doing the magic that the local satyrs, the local shamans did, the local mystics did in pre-Christian times, before all sort of like this proto New Age love and light stuff. You have to go into the dark side to manifest the light, and she seems to have gone deep into the dark side. I mean, some of the things she's done, like that rest energy thing where the guy Ule had the arrow, and if he let go of that, she was instantly killed. I mean, she was doing it back in the late here in Ireland back in the late 80s. That's astonishing stuff. And then the other thing where she had the people pick a weapon up off the ground. She was showing people what NPCs and what's deep. Like she had fellas were trying to rape her and everything. And she
this is that piece where she stood like naked, people do whatever to her. That one.
Yeah, all the weapons are on the table.
I heard about. It's like, wow,
including a loaded revolver, and she showed what she. Let me tell you, when I first read about that, I says, "Oh my God, what's that all about? Why did she subject herself to that?" And there's an awful picture where she's tears rolling down her eyes after some guy slapped her with a razor blade. And then the COVID thing came along, and I was like, we saw what monsters lied in ordinary people. Once there was a danger, and then I was like, thank you, Marina Abramovich. You fucking showed us this stuff long before it manifested into reality. And it actually helped us because we actually, the whole thing was like, we got to see the human race for what it really was in the West anyway during COVID, and it wasn't pretty. So she was kind of doing that on a micro level with her work. And that's really what I have to say about her. We don't have to like these people or love them, but we must pay attention to them because we're learning stuff from it. That's it.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Thomas, so much. I hope we can do this again. You enjoy your meal. I'm going to enjoy the rest of my weekend. Thank you guys so much tuning in the chat, and I'll see you all real soon.
Anytime, brother.
Take care, buddy.
I'll see you.